Okay, 5-minute grace period is up, so we're going to kick things off. Again, welcome. We're going to start with a PowerPoint presentation this morning. Wendy Paniza, the Property Services Manager, lovely lady in the black and white, is going to kick this off. She'll be followed by Victor Pollack, a gentleman at the table in the red tie, my Security Manager. And then after all the questions have been answered, we've got the distinguished Raymond Gross, GRF's director. He chairs our Security and Community Access Committee. He'll be available also after the presentation. So we would ask that you hold your questions until after the presentations are complete. Then we'll pick up the questions and direct them to the appropriate person. So with that, Wendy, welcome.
Okay, can you hear me? You can probably hear me without the microphone. Good morning. My name is Wendy Paniza. I'm the Property Services Manager here at Laguna Woods Village. I'll talk to you today about community access and the approved methods of entry for residents and their guests. Community access functions were incorporated into property services more than 10 years ago in order to afford Laguna Woods Village residents more streamlined access to services and information. We're located in the community center. We're the first 3 windows of the property services desk. We're open 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., Monday through Friday, except for holidays, and we can be reached by calling 949-597-4443, or better yet, the email address is communityaccess@pcm-inc.org. There are 2 approved methods for gaining access into the community for residents, and they are the vehicle decal and the resident identification card. Decals are required for all residents' vehicles, and they're valid for 1 calendar year. Decals are automatically renewed annually. Decals can only be applied to vehicles that are operated primarily by residents and parked in the community overnight. They are not permitted to be applied to your family vehicles, or other guests. And there's no commercial vehicles or non-operational vehicles cannot obtain decals on the vehicles. Resident ID cards are issued only to residents, including owners, occupants, and lessees residing in the community. These cards permit the use of facilities by residents and can be presented at the gate for entry if you're in a vehicle that does not have a decal. Gate entry passes also provide a means of access for non-resident owners, residents, guests, contractors, caregivers, businesses, and a variety of users. There are 5 types of passes, of gate entry passes. They are the green passes. I'm sure you're all familiar with these. You can get up to 5 annual guest passes per manor, and these can be issued to your friends and family. There are non-resident owner passes that are also issued annually. The annual guest passes and the annual non-resident owner passes are valid from July 1st of 1 year through June 30th of the following year. Business passes are issued upon application and can be temporary passes or annual passes. Annual business passes expire on January 7th of each year. The board approves any live-in care provider for a period of up to 1 year, and the care provider may obtain a live-in care provider pass valid for up to 4 months at a time. Finally, there are temporary passes. Temporary passes are also issued for up to 4 months at a time and are issued to new residents who are moving in, self-employed caregivers, realtors, conservators, executors, trustees, saddleback students, any variety of valid reason for obtaining a pass for gate entry. So far we've talked about decals and IDs for gaining entry by residents and the gate entry passes for non-resident guests. There are other acceptable methods to provide gate access to non-resident guests who do not carry a gate pass. The gate clearance system can be called any time of the day or night 24/7 at 949-597-4301. you can call up to 3 guests at a time per phone call into the gate clearance system. The names of your guests will be entered into the clearance system, and then when they arrive at the gate, they say who they are and they'll be permitted entry. The gate clearance form is used when you're inviting 4 or more non-resident guests into the community. Here's a gate clearance form. This is also a really good form to use. Let's say that you have a visitor that stays with you every Saturday night. And they do this throughout the year. You can submit this form with the name of that guest for every Saturday for the next 6 months. We'll enter the guest into the system, and then when they get to the gate, they'll be in the gate clearance system, and that's when they'll ask for a parking permit to be able to stay overnight. So it works in conjunction, the gate clearance system, with the gate clearance form for those guests who regularly stay overnight. And Victor will certainly provide more information on the parking permits. The gate clearance form with the tear-off flyer, I don't know if you've seen these. If you're a part of a club, you've probably seen this tear-off flyer. What it does is permit entry for the person who has completed the bottom of the form, and this is for whenever you don't know who all is coming in, but we need to know at the time that they come up to the gate. So this is really a good use of a flyer for clubs, usually club events. The box office tickets are also an acceptable method for gaining access, and that is provided for events that are coordinated by the Recreation Department. And then finally, as a last means effort, if someone is at the gate and they're not in the clearance system and they don't have a pass, you haven't provided any kind of upfront information about your guest, you can go to the gate to authorize the entry for the guests who have arrived there and don't have any means of entry. So if somebody's at the gate and they call you, hey, I'm not able to get in, you can either pick up the phone and call the gate clearance system, or you can actually go to the gate and allow let the gate ambassador allow permitted entry for your guests. Okay? So that was pretty quick. We will take questions later. I'm actually going to turn it over to Victor now to discuss the parking permits. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. How's everyone doing this morning? Good. If you don't mind, I'm going to come down off the podium and get a little bit closer here so I can see the same thing you are. My name is Victor Pollock. I'm the security manager here at Laguna Woods Village, and if I could have the next slide, please. I'm going to talk about some new rules that go into effect tomorrow. Everything that Wendy has covered so far are all about pieces that have been in place since time immemorial. They've always been in place here. But we're going to talk about a couple of new rules. And if I could have the next slide, the first piece of it is that all resident vehicles are going to require a GRF decal. In the past, that was an option. The board has ruled and decided that all resident vehicles must have the decal. This rule and the next one I'll be talking about are very consistent with what gated communities across the U.S. are doing. Laguna Woods Village has been out of step, if you will, with the best practices for gated communities across the country. There's a significant number of vehicles that are in overnight that nobody knows who they belong to, and we don't know whether they're authorized or not. And it poses a number of problems that are being addressed by this. So, if I could have the next piece, please. Guest vehicles, if they're going to be parked anywhere in the community between midnight and 6 a.m., require an overnight parking permit. And the image you see on the right-hand side is a sample of what that parking permit looks like. And I'll talk a little bit more about both of those. And the next slide, please. The important thing to know is that violators are subject to receiving a notice of violation or a possible tow notice. And I want to take just a minute to talk about this. It's not my desire or intention to have to tow away any cars, but those are the rules that we've been given and have been laid out to enforce these. If the vehicle belongs to a resident, and we know that it belongs to a resident, it will receive a notice of violation, which is this community's equivalent of a parking ticket, and that gets adjudicated by a security committee from GRF. It's a panel of your peers that will decide on that. If the vehicle is not registered with GRF, it's assumed to be an unauthorized and unknown vehicle, and it will receive a notice of potential tow. And if the vehicle ends up being towed away, it's quite expensive. It's on the order of $400 and up. Since people will ask, I want you to know that neither GRF nor any of the mutuals nor the security department gets a dime out of any of those fees that would be charged to get a towed vehicle out of impound. All of that money is taken by and collected by and held by the company that does the towing. So one of the reasons why we're having this presentation is to help make sure that everyone's educated, because I'd hate to have to tow anyone's vehicle away because they were unawares of the rules. But those are as they are, and we will be enforcing those beginning tomorrow. Could I have the next slide, please? This is, of course, an example of the decal, and just a reminder from what Wendy covered that if you do own a vehicle in here or you lease a vehicle, you can go to the community center during business hours and get a decal for it and be in full compliance. Next, please. Gate passes. A gate pass, the green visitor passes that you all have a supply of for your guest, is not the same as an overnight parking permit. Having a gate pass does not authorize a vehicle to park overnight. It has to have the overnight parking permit that we saw in the earlier slide. Next, please. Regarding guests, the rule for each of the mutuals as well as for GRF is that you can have a guest with you for up to 60 days in a year. Again, those are rules that are set by the mutual. That's 60 total days. So whether that's 60 days continuously or 60 days once or twice a week over the course of a year, that's the maximum number of days that are allowed. Again, if the guest is going to be overnight, the vehicle, if they're going to be here overnight and they have a vehicle, the guest must be listed in the gate clearance system computer that Wendy talked about before. There's a couple of different ways that you get your guests listed in there. First of all, if you have no more than 3 guests and they're going to be staying less than 14 days, you can call the gate clearance line. That's a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week phone number, 597-4301. So if you have someone just staying for a couple of nights, or a couple of people that are staying for just a few nights, less than 2 weeks, you can call that number and have their names put in, and that's going to be their authorization to get an overnight parking permit when they arrive. If you have more than 3 guests, or the guests are going to be staying longer than 14 days, you have to go through the Community Access Department. And again, this number's already been given to you, 597-4443, or stop by the community center and you fill out that gate clearance form that Wendy gave an example of earlier. Next slide, please. Thank you. When your guest arrives, all they need to do is let the gate ambassador know that they are cleared in the system and request an overnight parking permit. The ambassador will look their name up in the system. It's just done by first name. They'll verify that the person is going to be in for the number of days that you've specified, and the ambassador will write a overnight parking permit for them on the spot. and that parking permit just simply needs to be on the dashboard, on the driver's side, down by the window, in the vehicle overnight. It's very easy. If the person is not, if the guest is not in the gate clearance system computer, the ambassador will not be able to issue an overnight parking permit because we're assuming that the guest is not approved for overnight stay. If that should happen to one of your guests, they arrive and they can't find them in the system, there is a telephone at every gatehouse, and the guest can call you. Maybe you forgot to put the person in, or you had the dates wrong, or some other mistake happened. There is a telephone at the gatehouse. The visitor can call you, and you in turn can call the gate clearance line, and in a matter of a couple of minutes, their names will appear in the computer, and they will be able to receive the parking permit. If your visitor is going to be staying longer than 14 days, again, the ambassadors are limited to issuing a permit for 14 days only. So the ambassador will issue a permit for 14 days. If your guest is going to be staying for a month, before that permit expires, you'll need to go over to the stop at the community center and get an extended pass. At the community center, they can issue permits for up to 4 months at a time at their discretion. So that covers the length of time on that. If we could have the next slide, please. I want to talk about a few other categories. We were just talking about your regular visitors that come in. The next group of folks are live-in caregivers, and there's a lot of questions about live-in caregivers. The first point is that when we're talking about live-in caregivers, we're talking about folks that are approved by your mutuals board to live in the residence with you, essentially as a co-resident. They're authorized to be in there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And that's the only kind of caregivers I'm talking about in this particular regard. These caregivers also get a pass, a gate pass from Community Access for that same 4-month period of time. So what we will start doing is now that Community Access will also issue them a parking permit for that same 4-month period of time. If you have currently a live-in caregiver that is working on their current 4-month approval, you'll need to stop by Community Access and obtain a parking permit for them for the balance of their approved period of time. So they're not going to be able to go back and just backtrack those. So all they need to do is ask for it. At the same time as they get their gate pass, they can also get a parking permit. Next, please. The other kind of caregivers are those that come from contract companies or from people who are self-employed as a caregiver. These are folks that don't have the mutuals approval to live, and so they're essentially treated the same as any other guest. These people usually have a business pass that gets them in the gate, but again, the gate pass does not allow you to park overnight. So if you're going to have a self-employed person or a contract person in at night as a caregiver, those folks need to be in the gate clearance system. Again, as we talked about before, we can do this for up to 14 days by calling the gate clearance line, but probably the better way to do that is to stop at the community center and use the gate clearance form to list the name of your caregiver or to list the name of the company that provides the services for you, and have them input it, and they can input it for months and months at a time automatically. But that way we know these folks are approved, and then again, when they arrive at the gate, they can get an overnight parking permit as well. Next, please. Safe list. This is for the unexpected overnight guest. You have some folks come by to visit, and for whatever reason it wasn't planned, but someone's going to be staying overnight, and that's just fine. What we would ask, if it's before 9 o'clock, that you go ahead and call the gate clearance line, give your guest's name. The ambassador will enter it into the system, and then you can stop, or your guest can stop at any one of the gate houses and pick up the permit to put on the dashboard for overnight. However, if it's after 9 o'clock, or maybe there's been a dinner party and a little too much wine was consumed, you can also, after 9 o'clock, call the Security Communications Center at 580-1400 and have your guest's vehicle safe listed. And what you do is provide your name, manor number, and ID, your guest's first name, and your guest's vehicle license plate number. And our security dispatchers will simply keep a log, and they'll log down the information on that car, and they'll know that it's approved for that night only, and it won't receive a citation or a tow notice. So it's very easy to do. Very quick phone call. Lastly, for unusual situations and unusual circumstances that aren't otherwise covered here, for instance, we have some residents who drive rented vehicles or borrowed vehicles. The vehicle maybe belongs to their children, or they're driving a company car. We have some residents who, because of different business reasons, have a different car almost every week because they're driving something from out of the fleet. We also have folks who have to have moving containers and storage bins, or sometimes even construction equipment parked in a parking space because they're having a renovation done on their manor, or maybe a moving pod is being brought in for a few days while the resident is moving out. Pretty much anything that takes up a parking space needs to have the permit on it. So these are not issued at the gate or at community access. These are handled as a one-off unusual situation by one of our security administrators, Connie Fox, and her telephone number is 268-2313. So if you've got a circumstance that doesn't fit into any of the categories I talked about before, you can give Connie Fox a call, and we'll see if we can get this worked out for you. She also works at the community center. However, she's up on the second floor. She's not in the community services area. So that concludes my part of the presentation, and I thank you for your time and attention.